is Katherine Harvey. She's the Global Consultancy Director at Unwork, and she's going to talk about how we should think about the future. So everybody welcome Katherine.
Thank you very much. So nice that the opening remarks already align with what I'm going to say, because it is really about the people, and I'm going to be talking a lot today about experience, but I've been asked to talk about how we think about the future, and already got an AI created image here, and AI is going to be a little bit of a theme, but and I'm sure it's going to come up in a lot of the other talks today as well. And whilst I hate to start a talk with Elon Musk and give him any kind of airtime, he does, however, say some things that are very kind of much on people's minds. And I think the last thing he's really been talking about at the moment is how people are much more productive when they're in person. And I say, however much I hate to have him there, and whatever your view, workplace is in the headlines. It continues to be in the headlines because there is so much change and there is so much flux. So we're talking about how much people are actually spending time together in the offices, and I thought we'd have a little bit of a audience participation first, just to kind of get our blood moving a little bit. I wanted to show of hands really about how often you're going in to be with your colleagues in the workplace. So I want hands up for people who are going in 1 or 2 days a week. Okay, not bad. How about 3 or 4 days a week? Sort of similar. Anyone going hardcore 5 days? Okay, not so many. That's interesting. So some of the latest figures that I've been looking at before I was coming in today, looking at maybe Fortune 100 was the latest. Employers are asking people to come in 3 days a week, and employees are tending to go in 2 days a week. And I think that's maybe a lot of American companies here, and anybody got on the tube this morning, 3 days really I think is what people are starting to do. And if you come on the tube, it is so busy now, we must be at pre-pandemic levels. So the conversation last year was about magnetising people back into the office to be together, and companies were using loads of different ways to try and bring people in, from free food to subsidised travel, reconfiguring the space to try and kind of make it as good as possible for people to come in. And in some cases it worked. Some cases it didn't do as much as politicians and employers really wanted. And we actually saw people kind of really cheating the system. As my title says, I'm global, so we deal with companies all over the world, and some really bad behaviours in places like San Francisco, or good maybe if you think about it. They would go in, badge in the morning, have the free breakfast, and then go home and work from home for the rest of the day. So yeah, some really interesting things going on there, and I think the conversation this year really is the switch from magnetising to mandating. As you're already saying, companies are starting to say if you have a Friday off, you've got to come in on a Monday. You've got to have specific days in the office, and those have to flatten that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday curve and have Monday and Friday as part of those set days. So really seeing a change in that system. And I saw CBRE, one of the sponsors, said they're going to like this next slide. We found this data that CBRE just did a recent report, and really looking at if you're going to start mandating people back into the office, you've got to start tracking them. Otherwise, what's the point? What is that attendance? And 60% of companies are now tracking attendance in the office. And of those, they're using a number of different methods, the old-fashioned swipe cards, but also, interestingly, space utilization and space reservation with some kind of manual manager's time as well. But of those that are tracking it, how many are actually enforcing it? And it's only 8% at the moment, but we see that as a potential growth area. Not necessarily a good thing, because really you want people to be there, not because they're going to be punished for it. And within that, we've heard some various different stories, like people's bonuses being linked to being in the office, and even people being fired if they're not going in for the key number of days. And also predicting maybe there might be a bit of an HR issue coming out of that, because some of it seems a little bit draconian, if you ask me. From the same report, there was also some information about not only attendance but utilization, and I think this is really interesting for us, because yes, we're using swipe card data, but it's the other methods of tracking utilisation and attendance in the office that are really interesting. And it's not so much what people are doing now, but what they're thinking of that they will be using for in the future. And I think the growth in things like Wi-Fi networks and various different sensors is something that we're definitely seeing. So as a company, we track development in sensors and data around the world. It's a really fast developing market, and there's some really exciting products coming out. You have things like standalone sensors, stuff like VergeSense, which seem to measure everything. There's a new sensor system called Pangium, which they can even track how your body is in a different space to work out what people are actually doing in those spaces, whether they're having meetings or huddles or whether they're just doing quiet focused work. So some really cool stuff there. But equally, we're seeing a growth around using existing systems and networks to provide that data to basically act as sensors. And one of those is around AV systems. So Zoom have been doing this for a while, that you can count the people in the room through the software. It's not always that perfect, but it does give a kind of rough trend. And their latest development is they're introducing biometrics and facial recognition to actually give names to the people in the room. Another, I think Cisco really kind of pushing the envelope in this. I think everything on their system now is acting as a sensor, from wireless access points to desk hardware to AV systems as well. So they can measure everything from occupancy, people counting, environmental data, and energy usage data. And I was fortunate enough to be in South America at the end of last year giving some talks about data. And in those countries, people are much more suspicious about their governments using their data, I think, because of past kind of political situations. They really don't like that kind of big brother view. But somehow, when you're using existing systems to understand how a building's being used, it's much more palatable. And I think we can potentially learn some lessons from there. In Europe, there's still some hesitancy around how we use data, and I think maybe using current systems is a way to kind of navigate some of those tricky situations. And just a little bit about me and Unwork. So Unwork is part, just to kind of give you a bit of idea about our pedigree. I'm part of Ungroup, which has Work Tech conferences and Work Tech Academy. Unwork is a management consultancy focused on the new world of work and really kind of looking at workplace innovation and the future of work. Some of our current clients, we're working with JP Morgan on their new HQ in Manhattan, have been for a number of years now. We're also working with Blackstone on their new HQ in Berkeley Square, which had its groundbreaking session last week with Rishi Sunak rolled out. And equally work with public sector clients like British Council and also things like Engineering Society and BBC. And Work Tech Academy is part of our group. They really kind of curate knowledge and innovation about what is happening in the workplace onto an online membership platform, but also work with companies on thought leadership. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is really our position about spotting trends about workplace innovation and what's happening. We really kind of have this global footprint, and we can spot what's happening in different regions and bring it to our clients. So it's quite interesting. So today I really wanted to focus on two kind of key areas that we see really developing over the next year, and they're all based around experience. It's all about the experience, how you understand experience, curate experience, and then measure experience. So experience for us is made up of a number of different areas. So workspace, I'm going to be talking about this a bit later, but there's some really interesting physical space changes, new typologies, as we call it, that are developing as a result of coming out of COVID, and how people need to incorporate digital equity into their workspace. Process and support, it's usually kind of a quite dry area, but actually there's some really exciting things happening in this area at the moment. We're seeing things called place makers, experience makers, day makers, being brought in mainly from kind of a hospitality background. That's where they're being recruited, but a whole different kind of job function to really ensure that people's working days are as good as possible. And they'll be doing everything from kind of light tech support to moving furniture around in hackable spaces, or even kind of creating social events, because ultimately, every survey you ever do is people come in to be with their people. And then the intersection between people, culture, and technology is another really kind of exciting area. And this is where we see AI coming in to bring teams together, kind of identifying the right people to be working on projects, and then aligning the right space for them so that they really are optimizing the way that people work. And there's some such interesting pilots going on in that particular space at the moment. So I think most of us kind of have this thought, what is my week looking like, on a Sunday night? Like, which days am I going in? What do I have to be doing? And increasingly, this is now being done through digital platforms. And I think the expectation of the next generation is that everything will be done through phones. And again, some really exciting areas of development for workplace experience apps. Showing us where our teams are going to be on each days and identifying, again, through the use of AI, which days to come in based on our habits and experiences when our teams are coming in, and bringing lots of data sources to identify which key days. So this one's saying, Friday's a good day, all your team's going to be in, and there's after-work drinks. It knows me very well. And I think coming out of that, what we're doing with many of our clients now is seeing a growth in experience mapping. So before you would bring in something like a workplace experience app, or you're contemplating a big change to the office space, or going out for a big technology RFP, we're now getting involved early on around experience mapping. And this looks at the kind of technology, space, and experience touch points throughout the day. And I was thinking about this last night, like how best to kind of sum up. And I think it's because I've got many children in my house doing GCSEs, A-levels and things at the moment I'm involved with. It feels to me like this is like, the best analogy is like planning your essay. You need to do your research, you need to plan your essay to get the best results. Otherwise, you're wasting a lot of time down the road and potentially wasting a lot of money. So if you're mapping out that experience and really identifying the pain points, the touch points, it really helps. It's kind of a good insurance against the process you're about to embark on. So this is a very light touch, like kind of digital journey, perfect day through the office. We go much deeper. This starts to look at front stage and backstage, where you are looking at the key touch points through your day, but then also the backstage of what stakeholders are involved, what your dependencies, your enablers, and we go into a lot of depth, and that tends to flush out a lot of issues where there are gaps. And even more in depth here, we start to look at the experience and the emotions of people as they're going through, how connected they need to feel, how convenient it is, how engaged they are at the various touch points in the day. And with large clients, I say something like JP Morgan, huge company with many different personas, we would start to look at those different segments within that. And here you can see it's much more detailed. We've got a persona around sales and trading and what their experience is, and what then the gap is in the various points in their day that then would form a program of work. But not only employee personas, we really start to look at client personas. So a lot of financial firms, law firms are really interested in what that end-to-end client experience is. So you can really start to map out, do they have their own app? What's the technology that experience when they're coming into this space? And also recruits. It's still a war for talent out there. There's always, everybody's competing for the same people. How do you make that great first impression and map out that whole experience for people coming in for their first interview, for their second interview, etc.? And we can also go super granular. So this is just looking at one particular element of that around conference booking. And we would look here at the current state. So these red boxes are the real pain points of what the current experience is. Having those kind of brainstorming sessions, looking at other sectors. We learn a lot from hospitality, travel, other sectors about what a really great experience is. And then we map out the future state. And that allows, again, to really understand some of the elements and requirements here would then go into an RFP. And ultimately, we want to create magical experiences for people to come together. I keep hearing the word joy a lot when we're talking to clients. How do you create joy in the day? Because it's hard work being on Zoom. You were saying, whole days on Teams and Zoom is very draining. You've got to have those moments in the day where you come together, and it is magical. And I think being in person with your colleagues and solving a problem together can be really magical. Something is created that is more than the sum of its parts. But like Burning Man here, these things don't just happen. They have months and years of preparation to create these what seem to be spontaneous moments, but there's a lot going on underneath. And we're seeing a lot of growth in technology in these spaces, as I've just been talking about, but also there's a real change in the physical space. I wanted to bring you a couple of kind of exciting things that I'm seeing at the moment. So this is not that new. Campfire came out of the pandemic, and it was a new way of trying to incorporate remote participants into those physical meetings. And this is Google Campfire, they piloted this space. It's just made with hardwood or whatever, and they were looking at different technologies that allowed them to bring that digital equity. And I think ultimately it didn't quite work, but the concept was great. Microsoft Teams rooms, again, different configurations of desks. We're seeing lots of half-moon shapes in order to give that people calling in to a meeting the same experience as those in the room. And I think there's a lot in this design. I'm going to show you in a second. The other space that we're seeing a big development is around the Agora space, bringing people together. As I was saying earlier, every survey you do, it's people come in to be with their colleagues, and we're seeing a real demand for all-hands space, town hall space, but enabled by amazing technology. So I think this is Royal Bank of Scotland, but we're seeing this kind of really growing. And then the excitement, I think, is around the combination of the Campfire space with the Agora space to create a digital equity in these larger meetings. So I just want to show this is kind of a new space. This is for a private equity firm we were working with. In private equities, they have big Monday morning meetings. But this could apply. I've also seen something similar at Barclays. You have a big team meeting, but really enabled by many screens, fantastic audio, and people in the room, outnumbering those who are remote. But that experience being really kind of just aligned and really embedded in the whole design of the space, and I think it's pretty exciting. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about data, and this is a trend that we're really seeing for 2024, the new metric. I wrote a piece for our sister organisation, WorkTech Academy, around return on experience. So this is really where, instead of return on investment, it's what is the business benefit of creating an amazing experience in your workplace, and using data to take away that subjectivity. I mean, we've all sort of, survey fatigue is a real thing. You don't really get a great picture from surveys. So what different data sources can you use to really understand the experience and then measure it? And what we're seeing is creating a metric, like a single figure that is then reported up to senior stakeholders in how the experience in that building is doing and what changes you make to various levers that can influence that experience. So here's some of the components maybe of an employee experience. So since I wrote that piece at the beginning of January, we've been talking to many clients. So this is evolving even as I'm speaking. So the various elements from kind of entry experience to technology, food and well-being, organizational elements. And each of these would be, it's like a sort of thumbprint really, or fingerprint. It's unique to each organization. You would have, depending on the priorities of the organization, the different data sources that you would be looking at, and the quality of that data. Obviously, some data sources are not good as others. And then the different weighting to create this kind of perfect experience metric or experience index. And then the point of that being that you can then compare the experience in various buildings within your portfolio, and then ultimately even between organizations. So I think this is something really to watch in 2024. So just going into the detail a little bit more. So something like the entry experience would be looking at booking data, dwell time, wayfinding, visitor management, and we'd be looking at all those data sources to create the metric around entry experience that would then go into the bigger metric. Technology, it's Microsoft Viva Insights, if you've looked at that, how people are using the technology, support tickets around it, all adding up to create this metric. So I think this is something that is really going to start coming through this year. I say we're talking to some really big clients around how to create these indexes for them. So something to bear in mind. So I wanted to leave you with kind of three big kind of thoughts, really. The first is that 2024 is going to be the year of the experience. focus on, everybody's talking about the experience of being in the office. You've got to be in now, we're mandating it, but how can you make that as optimal as possible? Secondly, to really understand that experience, it's taking a step back and using experience mapping to plan your essay before you start and really understand what are the requirements, where are the gaps, who's going to be involved, which services and technologies before you take that next step is a really kind of cost-effective way of understanding what experience you're aiming for. And then lastly, the experience index, the return on experience. What data can you use? What data is available to give you a much more objective view of how people are experiencing the workplace and the changes and investments that you're going to be making, what impact they're going to have on that overall experience, I think is a real thing to be watching for 2024. And gosh, that went very quickly. Thank you very much.